The cerulean darkness of Eden Prime's forest canopy swallowed what little ambient light remained as Evra, Red, and Vashi trudged deeper into the restricted zone. Her crimson, metallic-sheened skin reflected the bioluminescent fungi that carpeted the forest floor, casting an ethereal glow around her slender form. Silver hair, pulled back in a tight, practical braid, trailed down her spine, bobbing with each careful step she took through the dense underbrush. Field log, day 17. She whispered into the recording device strapped to her wrist. The native bioluminescent mushroom colonies appear to be expanding at an accelerated rate compared to last week's observations. The mycelium network has spread approximately 30 meters further west, suggesting some form of collective intelligence, or at least synchronized growth patterns. Evra paused, kneeling to extract a sample from one particularly vibrant cluster of azure fungi. Her movements were practiced efficient, the result of years spent in xenobiological research across a dozen frontier worlds. As the only Nashi xenobiologist permitted to conduct solo expeditions within the Federated Council's jurisdiction, she'd earned her reputation for meticulous data collection and extraordinary survival skills. Ambient temperature remains constant at 24 degrees Celsius, despite the approaching nightfall. She continued carefully sealing the fungal sample in a containment unit. Heightened spore activity could indicate a twig snapped somewhere behind her. Evra froze her large almond-shaped eyes, black as obsidian, with tiny flecks of silver scanning the shadows. Eden Prime's ecosystem was notorious for its evolutionary anomalies, creatures that defied conventional categorization. The Federated Council had declared the dense jungle a restricted zone for precisely this reason: unpredictable fauna, with capability for extreme aggression and adaptation. 3 deep breaths. That's all she allowed herself before resuming work. Fear was a luxury xenobiologists couldn't afford. Not when every sample, every observation could lead to breakthroughs in understanding interplanetary biodiversity. Continuing analysis, she said, voice steady, despite the prickling sensation creeping along her spine. The bioluminescent reaction appears triggered by both proximity and, this time, the sound was unmistakable, a heavy, sinuous movement through the undergrowth. Evra's hand instinctively moved to the pulse disruptor at her hip. Standard issue meant for emergency defense only. Using it required mountains of paperwork and ethical review. The Federated Council strictly regulated weapons discharge in protected ecosystems. "Hello," she called out, immediately regretting breaking protocol. Announcing her presence to an unknown predator went against everything in the field manual. The silence that followed was more unnerving than any response could have been. She rose slowly, backing toward a massive trunk of what resembled an earth sequoia, though the bark oozed an amber substance that hardened in contact with air. Her back pressed against it, seeking stability as she scanned the darkening forest. The attack came from above. A massive sapphire-scaled body dropped from the canopy, its 6-meter length unfurling like a living whip. Before Evra could activate her disruptor, powerful coils wrapped around her torso, pinning her arms to her sides. The pulse disruptor clattered uselessly to the ground. Air expelled from her lungs in a painful rush as the serpent began to constrict. "Evolutionary anomaly," she gasped, scientific curiosity somehow persisting despite her dire situation. "Constrictor species, previously undocumented." The massive snake tightened its grip scales, gleaming with an unnatural metallic sheen, similar to her own skin. Its head triangular and adorned with sensory pits that glowed with the same blue luminescence as the fungi swayed before her face. A forked tongue flicked out, tasting her fear on the air. Evra's vision began to darken at the edges. Her ribs creaked under the immense pressure. "Not like this," she wheezed, struggling futilely against the creature's crushing embrace. As consciousness began to slip away, her Nashi physiology triggered its last survival mechanism, a surge of adrenaline-equivalent hormones that temporarily enhanced her strength. With one arm partially freed, she reached for the small utility blade in her boot. Too far, her fingers grasped air. The snake constricted further, and Evra heard a crack, one of her lower ribs giving way. Pain lanced through her abdomen. Just as her vision tunneled to a pinpoint, the pressure suddenly released. The serpent's body convulsed violently, its head jerking backward as a gleaming blade sliced through its scales. A spray of luminescent blue blood painted the forest floor as the massive snake unwound, thrashing in agony. Evra collapsed to the ground, gasping desperately for air. Through the haze of pain and oxygen deprivation, she made out a humanoid figure, male, tall, wielding what appeared to be a vibro machete. The serpent, wounded, but still dangerous, reared back for a counterattack. The stranger moved with practiced precision, ducking beneath the creature's strike and delivering another devastating slash across its throat. More luminescent blood spattered across the fungi-covered ground, causing the mushrooms to pulse vibrantly in response to the fluid. With a final shuddering hiss, the massive constrictor collapsed, its body twitching before going still. Evra managed to push herself to a sitting position, arms wrapped protectively around her injured ribs. Each breath was agony, but her mind was already cataloging the snake's unusual features, its bioluminescent sensory pits, the metallic quality of its scales, the unexpected intelligence in its attack strategy. "You're welcome," said a deep, gruff voice. She looked up at her savior, human, male. Approximately 2 meters tall, with broad shoulders and a sturdy build suggesting adaptation to higher gravity. His face was weathered beneath several days' growth of beard eyes, a startling pale blue that seemed almost out of place against his tan skin. The vibro machete in his hand still hummed with energy, blue serpent blood sizzling as it evaporated from the superheated blade. "That's a restricted weapon on a restricted planet," Evra noted, her voice raspy from the constriction. "And you're in a restricted zone." The man's mouth quirked in a lopsided smile. "Like I said, you're welcome." He deactivated the machete and slid it into a sheath on his thigh. "Jack Stone. Most people call me Raider." "I'm not most people," Evra replied coldly, attempting to stand. Pain shot through her side and she stumbled. Jack caught her arm, steadying her. "Broken ribs, probably. Got a medkit back at my camp." "You have a camp in a council-restricted zone." Evra pulled away from his grip, wincing. "That's at least 3 separate violations of—" "Do you always thank your rescuers by reciting regulations at them?" Jack interrupted, crossing his arms. "Because I gotta say, it's not the warmest response to saving your life." Evra glared at him, but had to concede the point. "Thank you for the intervention," she said stiffly. "I am Evra Invashi, xenobiologist with Council Clearance Alpha 7. "Fancy. And what's a council-cleared xenobiologist doing out here alone?" Jack asked, glancing around the darkening forest. "Even with all your clearances, this place isn't exactly hospitable after dark." As if to emphasize his point, distant howls echoed through the trees, something between a wolf's call and the grinding of metal on metal. "I was collecting samples," Evra said, gesturing to her scattered equipment, before being interrupted. "By becoming a snake snack," Jack nodded. "Look, night's falling. Those blue shrooms get real active after dark, and they attract things a lot worse than our dead friend here. My camp's about 2 clicks north. You can patch up, rest, and lecture me about council regulations in the morning." Every instinct told Evra to decline. This human was clearly some kind of smuggler or illegal resource harvester. Associating with him could jeopardize her research credentials and council standing. Another chorus of metallic howls, closer this time, made the decision for her. "Fine," she acquiesced, retrieving her pulse disruptor and sample case. "Lead the way, Mr. Stone." "Just Stone, or Jack. Mr. makes me sound like somebody's accountant." Jack's camp turned out to be significantly more established than Evra had expected. Hidden beneath a natural overhang of rock and reinforced with salvaged plasteel panels, the shelter was well camouflaged against both Eden Prime's aggressive wildlife and she suspected council patrol drones. Inside, the space was surprisingly organized. A small generator hummed quietly in one corner, powering basic lighting, and what appeared to be a compact communications array, though Evra noted It had been modified to mask its signature output. A weapons rack held an assortment of tools that definitely weren't on the Council's approved equipment list. "Smuggler," she said flatly, easing herself onto a folding stool while Jack rummaged through a storage container. "Transport specialist," he corrected without looking up. "Illegal transport specialist. Only if you consider the Council's taxonomic classification and resource restriction policies to be the final word on interplanetary ethics." He turned, holding a medical scanner and what looked like a bone knitter. "Which, judging by that Alpha 7 clearance, you probably do." Evra remained silent as Jack approached with the medical equipment. She was in no position to refuse treatment. Her Nashi physiology was similar enough to human that standard medical tools would work, and the pain in her side was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. "Need to scan you," Jack said, his tone shifting to something more professional. "May I—" The formality surprised her. She nodded, lifting her arm to allow access to her injured side. Jack activated the scanner, passing it slowly over her ribcage. "2 fractures lower left side," he reported. "Clean breaks, though. Bone knitter should fix them overnight." "You seem practiced at this," Evra observed as he prepared the device. 7 years planet hopping through the frontier teaches you field medicine real quick," he replied. "Hold still." The bone knitter hummed to life, emitting a warm, tingling sensation as it accelerated the natural healing process. Evra exhaled slowly as the pain began to subside. "That should do it," Jack said, setting aside the device. "No strenuous activity for at least 12 hours, while the bone integration completes." "Thank you," Evra said with genuine gratitude this time. "I apologize for my initial abruptness." Jack waved a dismissive hand. "Hazard of the job. Council types don't usually warm up to me right away." He moved to a small cooking unit. "Hungry, got some protein packs and actual coffee, real earth beans, not that synthetic stuff." The mention of coffee, a rare luxury on frontier worlds, made Evra reassess her smuggler hypothesis. Whatever Jack Stone transported, it wasn't low-value goods. "Coffee would be welcome," she admitted. As Jack prepared the drinks, Evra studied him more carefully. His movements were efficient, economical military training perhaps, or extensive survival experience. The vibro machete and other weapons suggested combat proficiency, but he handled the delicate coffee preparation with unexpected precision. "So," Jack said, handing her a steaming cup, "what brings a Nashi xenobiologist to the deadliest part of Eden Prime's restricted zone? And don't tell me it's just for glowing mushrooms." Evra inhaled the rich aroma of the coffee before answering. "The bioluminescent fungi represent one of the most complex symbiotic networks documented in any ecosystem. They appear to communicate, share resources, and even demonstrate rudimentary collective problem-solving." "Sounds like a fungus cult," Jack quipped, taking a seat across from her. Despite herself, Evra's lips twitched in amusement. "Not entirely inaccurate, but there's more. The fungi seem to have co-evolved with the local fauna in ways that defy conventional evolutionary models. That snake that attacked me, for instance, its sensory pits glowed with the same bioluminescence." "Notice that," Jack nodded. "Seen it in other creatures too. Like they're connected somehow." Evra leaned forward, curiosity piqued. "You've observed this phenomenon repeatedly?" Jack took a long sip of coffee before answering. "Been here 3 months. Seen things that would make your council scientists rethink their taxonomy charts. 3 months illegally camped in a restricted zone." Evra couldn't keep the disapproval from her voice. "Legally, definitely not," Jack conceded with a shrug. "But I have a good reason." "I'm listening." Jack set down his cup and reached for a battered tablet. He activated it, revealing a 3-dimensional holographic projection of a creature unlike anything Evra had ever documented. It resembled an aquatic organism somewhere between an earth octopus and a jellyfish, but with a complex, almost crystalline internal structure visible through translucent tissues. "The locals call it the Phantom Hydra," Jack explained, manipulating the projection to highlight different aspects of the creature's anatomy. It's semi-aquatic, appears only during specific lunar alignments, and according to legend, it's been here since before humans made first contact. Evra studied the projection with growing fascination. This creature, it shouldn't exist. The physiological structure defies biological principles. Yeah, well, Eden Prime's full of impossible things. Jack expanded the hologram, focusing on what appeared to be neural pathways throughout the creature's body. See this? These aren't just nerves. They're some kind of bioluminescent conductors, similar to your mushroom network but exponentially more complex. How did you obtain this data? Evra asked, professional interest, temporarily overriding her ethical concerns. Jack's expression turned guarded. Let's just say I have clients interested in unique biological specimens, particularly those with potential applications in neural interface technology. You're here to capture it, Evra realized, drawing back slightly. To sell it. To study it, Jack corrected. And yes, profit is involved. But this creature isn't just some commodity. The Phantom Hydra might hold the key to true interspecies neural communication beyond translators, beyond empathy drugs. Direct mind-to-mind connection. The concept wasn't entirely new. Various corporations and research institutions had pursued interspecies communication technologies for decades with limited success. The ethical implications alone had stalled most legitimate research. The Council has banned neural harvesting, Evra reminded him. Who said anything about harvesting? Jack's eyes narrowed. I'm talking about communication, contact, understanding. For profit. For progress, Jack countered. With profit as a bonus. And speaking of bonuses, he leaned back, studying her. You know, a xenobiologist with Alpha 7 clearance would make tracking and studying the Hydra a whole lot easier. Evra laughed incredulously. You can't be serious. You want me to help you poach a potentially sentient species from a restricted ecosystem? First, not poaching if we're just studying it. Second, Jack continued, counting on his fingers. Your research on interspecies symbiosis would benefit enormously from documenting the Hydra. And third, I'm offering a 50-50 split on whatever comes from this expedition. I'm not interested in profit, Evra said firmly. No. What about knowledge? No other xenobiologist has ever had access to data that could revolutionize your understanding of cross-species neural networks. Jack's eyes gleamed with the confidence of someone who knew exactly which buttons to push. The Council won't authorize that kind of research for decades. Too many ethical committees, too much red tape. Evra fell silent, conflict evident on her face. Her entire career had been built on pushing boundaries, on discovering what others couldn't or wouldn't. And the Phantom Hydra, if Jack's data was accurate, represented an evolutionary anomaly that could transform xenobiological science. One day, she finally said, I'll accompany you for 1 day of observation only. No capturing, no sampling without proper protocols. Jack's face split into a victorious grin. Deal. We leave at first light. There's a tributary about 6 clicks east where the Hydra was last sighted. As Evra settled into the surprisingly comfortable sleeping pod Jack provided, she couldn't help but question her decision. Collaborating with a smuggler violated at least 7 Council regulations. If discovered, she could lose her clearance, her position possibly even face criminal charges. Yet the prospect of studying the Phantom Hydra, of witnessing true evolutionary transcendence, was too compelling to resist. Sleep came fitfully filled with dreams of luminescent networks, spreading through her mind like the mycelium throughout Eden Prime's forest floor. Evra woke to the gentle hum of Jack's bone knitter completing its work. The pain in her side had diminished to a dull ache. She stretched cautiously, testing the repair. Good as new, Jack commented, noticing her movement. He was already fully dressed, checking equipment on a compact backpack. Or close enough for fieldwork, coffee. Please, Evra sat up, running a hand through her silver hair. What's our route? Jack activated a 3-dimensional topographical map on his tablet. We'll follow this ridgeline east for about 4 kilometers, he explained, tracing the path with his finger. Then descend to the river valley. The Hydra seems to move between these underground water systems and surface pools depending on lunar cycles. Both moons are waxing, Evra noted. If local legends are accurate about lunar influence, timing should be optimal. Jack raised an eyebrow. Been studying local folklore alongside your fungi. Comprehensive research requires understanding indigenous knowledge systems, Evra replied primly, accepting the coffee he offered. The native tribes of Eden Prime had encountered the Hydra long before colonization, and were promptly relocated to protected cultural preserves when the council declared this sector restricted, Jack added, with undisguised bitterness. Evra frowned. The relocation program was voluntary. Sure it was, Jack muttered, shouldering his pack. Drink up, we've got a long hike ahead. The tension lingered as they prepared for departure. Evra gathered her research equipment, sample containers, scanners, and data recorders, while Jack checked an assortment of weapons that made her increasingly uncomfortable. Is all that firepower necessary? She asked, as he strapped a pulse rifle to his back alongside the vibro machete. Yesterday's snake was the friendly local welcome committee, Jack replied without looking up. Trust me, what lives deeper in these forests makes that constrictor look like a therapy pet. They set out as the first rays of Eden Prime's primary sun filtered through the canopy, casting dappled patterns across the luminescent undergrowth. The bioluminescent fungi dimmed in the growing daylight, but remained faintly visible, creating a ghostly network of blue veins throughout the forest floor. Jack moved with surprising silence for his size, each step carefully placed to minimize disturbance. Evra followed his example, her natural Nashi agility, making her an even quieter travel companion. Your species evolved as ambush predators, didn't they? Jack observed, after they'd been walking for nearly an hour. Evra glanced at him, surprised by the accurate assessment. Yes. Before technological advancement, Nashi were primarily arboreal hunters. The reflective quality of our skin served as camouflage in our homeworld's crystalline forests. Explains the way you move, Jack nodded appreciatively. Like you're always stalking something. Our evolutionary history doesn't define our present identity, Evra responded somewhat defensively. Just as I assume you're not defined by your ancestors' primate tree swinging. Jack chuckled. Touché. Though some might argue I haven't evolved far beyond that. The banter helped ease the tension between them as they navigated the increasingly dense jungle. Twice they had to detour around territorial markers, claw marks on massive trees, oozing amber sap, accompanied by pungent musk that even Evra's less sensitive olfactory system could detect. Apex predator, she noted, after examining one such marking. Similar to Panthera species, but with prehensile capabilities judging by the claw pattern. Locals call them shadow stalkers, Jack confirmed. Nasty pieces of work. Hunt in mated pairs and communicate across distances we still don't understand. Infrasound, perhaps? Evra theorized, documenting the marking with her scanner. Or chemical signals through the mycelium network. Around midday, they reached a dramatic overlook, a sheer cliff face dropping several hundred meters to a winding river below. The water gleamed with the same ethereal blue luminescence as the fungi, suggesting a connected ecosystem spanning multiple environments. Jack produced a hydration pack and offered it to Evra before taking a swig himself. We'll need to find a way down. The Hydra frequents those deeper pools in the river bend. Evra studied the landscape, squinting against the midday glare. There, she pointed to a less steep section about half a kilometer south. That descent looks manageable. As they followed the ridgeline toward the potential descent route, Jack suddenly froze, raising his hand in a silent signal to stop. Evra complied immediately, instinctively, lowering her posture. Jack slowly reached for his rifle eyes, fixed on something in the distance. Following his gaze, Evra spotted an anomaly in the jungle pattern, a structure partially concealed by vegetation, but unmistakably artificial. That's not a natural formation, she whispered. No, Jack agreed, voice equally low. And it's not council construction either. Too old. Curiosity overrode caution. With silent communication that belied their brief acquaintance, they diverted from their planned route, approaching the mysterious structure with practiced stealth. As they drew closer, Evra's scientific training kicked into overdrive. The structure appeared to be an entrance, a doorway of sorts carved into the living rock of the cliffside. Geometric patterns too precise to be natural erosion framed the opening. Most remarkably, veins of bioluminescent material ran through the stone, like a circulatory system, pulsing gently in rhythm with the surrounding fungi. Pre-colonization architecture. Evra breathed, running her scanner over the patterns. But these aren't indigenous designs. This predates even the native tribes. Jack holstered his weapon, drawn to the entrance despite the obvious risks. Another species was here before us, before anyone. The opening led to a passage that descended into the cliff face, illuminated by the same blue bioluminescence that permeated the jungle. Cool, damp air wafted from within, carrying unfamiliar scents. "We should document this and report it to the council," Evra said, though her voice lacked conviction. The discovery was too tantalizing to walk away from. Jack gave her a knowing look. "Sure, we can do that. After we take a quick peek inside." "Archaeoxenobiology isn't my specialty," Evra protested weakly. "But interspecies communication is," Jack countered, nodding toward the glowing patterns. "And something tells me these aren't just decorative." Rational arguments failed in the face of such an unprecedented discovery. With a resigned sigh that poorly masked her excitement, Evra activated her body-mounted recording equipment. "Field log supplemental," she narrated as they cautiously entered the passage. "Discovered artificial structure integrated with the bioluminescent network. Construction method and age undetermined. Proceeding with preliminary investigation." The passage descended at a gentle angle, the walls smoothed by what appeared to be deliberate design rather than natural processes. The bioluminescent veins grew more numerous and complex as they proceeded deeper, forming patterns that reminded Evra of neural pathways. After approximately 100 meters, the passage opened into a chamber that drew gasps from both explorers. The space was roughly circular, perhaps 30 meters in diameter, with a domed ceiling rising 15 meters at its apex. But it was the contents that rendered them momentarily speechless. At the center stood what could only be described as a control console, an organic-looking structure rising from the floor, like a mushroom cap, covered in depressions and protrusions that suggested an interface designed for manipulation. Surrounding this central feature, the walls were inscribed with spiraling patterns of luminescence that responded to their presence, brightening as they entered. "This can't be natural," Jack murmured, approaching the central console with undisguised wonder. "Engineered biology." Evra agreed, scanner working overtime to capture the unprecedented data. "A technology so advanced it's indistinguishable from organic life." The chamber hummed with subtle energy that Evra felt more than heard, a vibration at the threshold of perception that resonated somewhere behind her sternum. The sensation was not unpleasant, but definitely alien. Jack circled the control console, studying it from all angles. "These indentations," he observed, pointing to 5 depression points arranged in a pattern. "They're handprints, or something like hands anyway." Evra joined him, measuring the spacing with her scanner. The proportions suggest a being with similar morphology to humanoids, though the digit count is different, 6 not 5. As they examined the console, the luminescence pulsed more rapidly, as if responding to their scrutiny. "It's reacting to us," Jack said, a note of unease creeping into his voice. "Or to our presence. Dormant technology awakening." Evra theorized, excitement overtaking caution. This could be a communication node, perhaps even the control center for the entire bioluminescent network. Jack stared at the hand-shaped depressions, then at his own 5-fingered hand. "Close enough," he muttered. Before Evra could protest, he placed his palm against one of the depressions. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The entire chamber surged with blue light, the patterns on the walls accelerating their rhythmic pulsation. The console beneath Jack's hand warmed, softened, and partially enveloped his fingers like living tissue. Jack. Evra moved to pull him away, but he raised his free hand to stop her. "It doesn't hurt," he assured her expression, caught between amazement and apprehension. It feels like it's reading me." The console continued to adapt around his hand, the material flowing to accommodate the differences in morphology. Then, without warning, a column of blue light erupted from the center of the console, resolving into a holographic display unlike any Evra had encountered. Three-dimensional images formed and dissolved in rapid succession landscapes. Star maps, biological diagrams, all rendered in varying intensities of the same blue luminescence. The images moved too quickly for comprehensive analysis, like a visual database being rapidly searched. "It's scanning your neural patterns," Evra realized, her scanner confirming unusual energy signatures. "It's trying to establish a compatible communication protocol." Jack's eyes widened. "Should I remove my hand?" Before Evra could answer, the rapidly shifting images stabilized on a single display, a detailed anatomical rendering of a humanoid species, with 6 digits per limb, elongated cranial structure, and physiological features that defied easy classification. "The Builders," Evra whispered reverently. As they stared at the holographic image, the console pulsed once more. A second depression on the opposite side of the console began to glow more intensely than the others. "I think," Jack swallowed hard, "I think it wants you to connect too. That would violate at least a dozen protocols regarding interaction with unknown technology," Evra said automatically, even as she found herself drawn toward the glowing interface. "Since when did that stop a scientist on the verge of the biggest discovery of her career?" Jack challenged gently. He was right, of course. No xenobiologist could resist such an opportunity, direct communication with an ancient advanced civilization through their own technology. The potential knowledge to be gained outweighed the considerable risks. With a deep breath, Evra placed her red-hued palm against the glowing depression. The sensation began as warmth, then transformed into something more profound, a tingling awareness that spread up her arm and into her consciousness. The console adapted to her hand, just as it had to Jack's, the living material, flowing to create a perfect interface. What happened next transcended ordinary experience. The chamber around them seemed to dissolve, replaced by a space that existed somewhere between physical reality and pure information. Evra could still see Jack across the console, his physical form overlaid with patterns of light that mapped his nervous system, cardiovascular function, brain activity, his entire physiological state rendered visible. From his wide-eyed expression, she knew he was experiencing something similar. Neural amplification. She managed to say, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. "It's enhancing our natural empathic capabilities." Humans and Nashi, like most sentient species, possessed rudimentary empathic abilities, the neurological foundation for social bonding and community formation. What this technology appeared to be doing was amplifying those natural circuits to unprecedented levels. Evra could feel Jack's emotions as clearly as her own, his excitement, his lingering doubt, his growing sense of wonder. More importantly, she could sense his intentions, the complex motivations that had brought him to Eden Prime. "You're not just here for profit," she realized aloud. Jack's surprise rippled through their shared awareness. "You can read my mind." "Not thoughts, emotional states, intentions." Evra struggled to articulate the experience. "The technology is creating a feedback loop between our limbic systems." As they adjusted to this new state of perception, the holographic display shifted again this time, presenting what appeared to be a historical record. Images flowed in chronological sequence, the rise of the six-fingered species, their discovery of the bioluminescent network, their gradual integration with it, until technology and biology became indistinguishable. Then came devastation, a cataclysm of some kind that nearly destroyed their civilization. The surviving members facing extinction uploaded their collective consciousness into the network itself, becoming one with the planetary ecosystem. "They're still here," Jack whispered, understanding dawning through their shared awareness. "Not as individuals, but as part of the network. The fungi, the animals with bioluminescent features, they're all expressions of the same consciousness." "And the Phantom Hydra?" Evra's revelation synchronized with Jack's. "It's not just another species. It's a concentrated node of the collective consciousness, a physical manifestation of their combined will." The emotional resonance between them intensified as this understanding took hold. Evra felt something unexpected blossoming in the connection, a warmth centered not just on intellectual discovery, but on Jack himself. His passion, his determination, the complexity beneath his roguish exterior. More alarmingly, she could sense his growing attraction to her, admiration for her intelligence, appreciation of her physical form, and something deeper taking root that neither had anticipated. Before they could process these unexpected emotional developments, the chamber trembled slightly, dust drifting from the domed ceiling. "Something's happening," Jack said, alarm spiking through their connection. The holographic display shifted dramatically, showing a real-time map of the surrounding area. A large mass was moving through the underground water system directly beneath them, something massive and fluid in its movements. "The Hydra," Evra breathed. "It's responding to the activation of this node." As if confirming her assessment, a section of the chamber floor receded, revealing a pool of luminescent water. The liquid surface began to churn, swirling into a vortex of blue light. Instinctively, both Evra and Jack tried to withdraw their hands from the console, only to discover they couldn't. The living material had formed a temporary bond with their skin. "Don't panic," Evra advised, though her own pulse had quickened considerably. "The technology isn't designed to harm compatible users. It's trying to facilitate a complete connection." "Complete connection with what?" Jack asked, eyeing the increasingly agitated pool. His question was answered as something began to emerge from the water, a translucent, gelatinous mass that pulsed with the same rhythmic bioluminescence as the surrounding technology. As it rose, the mass took form, multiple tentacle-like appendages, supporting a bulbous central body with crystalline structures visible within. The Phantom Hydra had arrived. Rather than the terrifying predator of local legend, however, the creature's movements were deliberate, almost graceful. It levitated partially out of the water, suspended by some force that defied conventional physics. Its presence in the shared empathic field was unmistakable, ancient, complex, curious. "It's not aggressive," Evra observed, sensing the entity's emotional signature through their amplified connection. "It's interested." The Hydra extended a delicate tendril toward them, its tip glowing more intensely than the rest of its body. The appendage moved with precision, first hovering near Jack, then Evra, as if sampling their empathic output. "I think it wants to communicate directly." Jack suggested, his initial fear giving way to scientific curiosity that matched Evra's own. Evra nodded, forcing herself to remain calm despite the extraordinary circumstances. "The console is just an interface. The Hydra represents a more direct connection to the collective consciousness." The tendril continued its evaluation, finally settling in a position equidistant between them. It expanded slightly, forming a small luminescent sphere at its tip. "Should we?" Jack looked at Evra, the unfinished question clear in both his voice and their emotional link. Science and caution warred briefly in Evra's mind before curiosity prevailed. "Together," she decided. In perfect synchronization facilitated by their shared awareness, they each extended their free hands toward the glowing sphere. Contact was unlike anything either had experienced. The empathic amplification through the console had been merely a prelude to this, a preparatory step for their consciousness to withstand direct communion with the entity. Information flooded Evra's mind, not as words or images, but as pure conceptual understanding. Millennia of history, biological knowledge, and evolutionary wisdom downloaded directly into her awareness. She perceived the rise and fall of the ancient civilization, their discovery of the neural network that spanned the entire ecosystem, their eventual decision to merge with it, rather than face extinction. Through Jack's shared connection, she felt his parallel experience, different aspects of the same vast knowledge base, flowing into his consciousness, tailored to his neural architecture and cognitive framework. Most profound was the emotional resonance, the profound sense of connection, not just to the Hydra and the ancient consciousness it represented, but to Jack himself. Their separate experiences filtered through the unique aspects of human and Nashi neurology, created a complementary understanding greater than either could have achieved alone. When the initial flood of information subsided, leaving behind an organized framework of new knowledge, Evra became aware that tears were streaming down her face. The beauty of what they'd witnessed, the seamless integration of biology and technology, the transcendence of individual consciousness into a collective whole without losing uniqueness, was overwhelming. They wanted to be remembered. Jack whispered, his voice thick with emotion that resonated through their connection. They preserved themselves this way, so their knowledge wouldn't be lost. Evra nodded, understanding completely. The Hydra isn't just a repository. It's a representative designed to evaluate potential species for compatibility with their knowledge. The creature pulsed in affirmation, its crystalline structures refracting the blue light in complex patterns. Through their enhanced perception, both understood its purpose. With sudden clarity, the ancient species had seeded their knowledge throughout the galaxy, establishing nodes like Eden Prime, where compatible intelligences might eventually discover their legacy. This is why the Council's restrictions were established, Evra realized. They must have detected the technological signatures, but failed to understand their true nature. Or understood all too well, Jack countered, a shadow passing through their emotional link. Controlled access means controlled profit. Before Evra could respond, the chamber's rhythmic luminescence faltered. The Hydra reacted immediately, withdrawing its tendril and retreating partially into the pool. "Something's wrong," Jack said, tension spiking through their connection. A new presence registered in their shared awareness, another consciousness entering the amplified field, but distorted somehow, its intentions fragmented and unclear. "We're not alone," Evra warned, scanning the chamber entrance. As if summoned by her words, a figure appeared in the passage, human male, elderly, but standing straight with military posture, dressed in expedition gear, bearing the insignia of a private research corporation, rather than council markings. "Impressive," the newcomer remarked, surveying the scene with clinical detachment. "You've accomplished in hours what my team couldn't achieve in months." Jack's emotional response was immediate and visceral recognition, followed by anger, spiked with betrayal. "Professor Thorne," he said flatly, "I should have known you'd be tracking me." The older man stepped fully into the chamber, flanked by two security personnel carrying advanced pulse weapons. His attention fixed on the Hydra, which had grown noticeably agitated, its bioluminescence pulsing in erratic patterns. "Jack Stone," Thorne acknowledged with a thin smile. "Always the perfect advanced scout, finding the pieces others miss, making the connections others overlook." His gaze shifted to Evra. "And now bringing us a council xenobiologist with Alpha 7 clearance. Your usefulness continues to exceed expectations." Evra turned to Jack, confusion and hurt radiating through their link. "You know this man?" Former employer, Jack, admitted, shame coloring the connection. "We parted ways over ethical disagreements." Such a diplomatic way to describe your theft of proprietary research and subsequent disappearance," Thorne remarked dryly. "But water under the bridge, as they say. Your discovery here more than compensates." Through their empathic link, Evra sensed the truth. Jack had indeed worked for Thorne, locating biological specimens with potential technological applications. But when he discovered the professor's methods involved destructive extraction, Rather than sustainable research, he'd sabotaged an operation and fled with critical data. "You're after the neural integration technology," Evra stated, understanding, dawning through the shared awareness. "You want to weaponize it." Thorne's expression remained impassive. "Weaponize is such a loaded term. I prefer optimize for strategic applications. The ability to create hybrid bioneural interfaces would revolutionize everything from medicine to military operations." The Hydra retreated further into the pool, its distress evident in both its physical movements and the emotional ripples it sent through the amplified field. "It's sentient," Jack said firmly. "The entire network is. You can't just harvest it like some resource." "On the contrary," Thorne replied, "its distributed consciousness makes it ideal for harvesting. Take one node, and the system adapts. Perfectly renewable." He gestured to his security personnel. "Secure the chamber. Prepare the containment unit." As the armed men advanced, Evra and Jack remained locked in position, their hands still bonded to the console. Through their connection, a desperate plan formed, not with words, but with shared intention and mutual understanding. They needed to protect the Hydra, and more importantly, the knowledge it safeguarded. Jack's eyes met Evra's silent confirmation passing between them. Instead of trying to break free from the console, they both pressed deeper into the connection, mentally reaching for the Hydra's presence in their shared awareness. The creature responded, its consciousness intertwining more completely with theirs. Power surged through the bioluminescent network, channeling through the console and into their bodies. The chamber's light intensified dramatically, forcing Thorne and his men to shield their eyes. Evra felt the change immediately, a tingling sensation that began at her interface with the console and spread rapidly throughout her body. The bioluminescent energy was restructuring her on a cellular level, integrating aspects of the ancient species' biology with her own. Jack was undergoing a similar transformation, his physiology shifting to accommodate the new neural pathways being established. Their shared awareness expanded exponentially, encompassing the entire chamber and beyond into the vast network that permeated Eden Prime. "Stop them!" Thorne commanded, recognizing too late what was happening. The security personnel raised their weapons, but the Hydra emerged fully from the pool, its tendrils extending in a protective barrier around Jack and Evra. Pulses of energy radiated from its crystalline core, disrupting the weapon's targeting systems. Through their transcendent awareness, Evra and Jack perceived Thorne's desperation, his lifelong pursuit of the ultimate neural interface technology, his conviction that controlling such power was necessary for humanity's advancement, his willingness to sacrifice anything for that goal. With this understanding came not hatred, but compassion. The same empathic amplification that connected them to each other and to the Hydra extended involuntarily to encompass Thorne as well. The professor staggered under the sudden influx of awareness, dropping to his knees, as the full impact of the ancient consciousness touched his mind. Unlike Jack and Evra's gradual integration, this forced connection overwhelmed his unprepared neural pathways. "Too much," he gasped, clutching his head. "Too vast." Evra felt his distress through their expanded awareness and instinctively modulated the connection, cushioning his mind from the full force of the collective consciousness. Jack followed her lead, their synchronized efforts creating a buffer that allowed Thorne to experience the connection without being destroyed by it. In that moment of shared consciousness, understanding flowed both ways. Thorne glimpsed the true nature of the ancient species' legacy, not a weapon or tool to be exploited, but a gift meant to elevate compatible species beyond their limitations. In turn, Evra and Jack perceived the genuine idealism beneath Thorne's ruthless methods, a desire to elevate humanity that had become corrupted by ambition and fear. The security personnel, witnessing their employer's collapse and the extraordinary transformation taking place, retreated toward the chamber entrance. Slowly, the intensity of the connection began to stabilize. The console released its hold on Jack and Evra's hands, the living material flowing back into its original configuration. They stepped back, supporting each other, as they adjusted to their altered physiology. Bioluminescent patterns now flowed beneath their skin, subtle blue veins visible through Jack's tanned complexion, elegantly complementing the metallic red of Evra's Nashi pigmentation. More significant were the internal changes, neural pathways restructured to maintain a permanent connection to each other and to the collective consciousness of Eden Prime. The Hydra settled back into the pool, but maintained a tendril of connection to both of them, a living link to the knowledge they now carried. Thorn remained kneeling, his breathing ragged, but stabilizing as he processed what he had experienced. When he finally looked up, his expression had transformed from calculated ambition to humble wonder. "All this time," he murmured, "I've been asking the wrong questions, seeking control when I should have been seeking communion." Jack approached him cautiously, extending a hand that now bore faint luminescent patterns along the fingers. "That's the thing about true knowledge, Professor. It's meant to be shared, not owned." Thorn accepted the assistance, rising unsteadily to his feet. "The neural harmonization technology I developed, it was a crude approximation of this." He gestured vaguely to the bioluminescent patterns visible on their skin. "But it might help stabilize your transformation." Evra stepped forward, her scientific curiosity engaging, despite the extraordinary circumstances. "What kind of technology?" "A neural harmonizer." Thorn explained, his scientific passion resurfacing. "Designed to synchronize disparate nervous systems for enhanced communication. It's in my pack." With cautious permission, Thorn retrieved a device roughly the size of his palm, an elegant construction of metals and bioengineered components. It was meant for controlled laboratory settings, but the principles should apply. Your physiologies are changing rapidly. This might help ease the transition. Through their shared awareness, both Jack and Evra sensed no deception, only a genuine desire to assist, born from the profound perspective shift Thorn had experienced. Evra examined the device with both her scientific training and her newly enhanced perception. "The integration algorithms are compatible with our altered neural patterns," she confirmed. "It could provide stabilization during the adjustment period." With silent agreement flowing through their connection, they allowed Thorn to activate the harmonizer. The device emitted a gentle field of energy that interacted with the bioluminescent patterns in their bodies, smoothing the chaotic fluctuations and bringing their transformations into alignment. The effect was immediate, a clarity of perception that settled the disorienting aspects of their changed physiology, while preserving the profound connection they had established. "Your previous methods were destructive because you were working with incomplete information," Evra told Thorn, understanding his research more completely through their shared awareness. "The ancient species designed their technology to function with living systems, not to be extracted from them." Thorn nodded, accepting the critique without defensiveness. "A lifetime of research, and in 5 minutes, I've learned more than in all those years combined." He looked between them, then at the Hydra still partially emerged from the pool. "What happens now?" Jack and Evra exchanged glances, their synchronized thoughts making verbal communication almost redundant. "The knowledge we've gained needs to be protected," Jack said, "but also shared responsibly. The Council needs to understand what really exists here on Eden Prime," Evra added. "Not just a restricted ecosystem, but a living library of an advanced civilization." Thorn's expression grew troubled. "You know they'll want to control access, regulate it, possibly exploit it despite your best efforts." "Which is why we need your help," Jack surprised himself by saying. The words emerged from their shared awareness, a solution neither had consciously formulated, but that felt intuitively right. "My help?" Thorn couldn't hide his astonishment. "Your reputation, your corporate connections, your research credentials," Evra elaborated, following Jack's thought. "Combined with my council clearance and Jack's unconventional network. A system of checks and balances." Thorn understood scientific mind engaging with the concept. No single entity with complete control. The Hydra pulsed with approval, its consciousness resonating through their connection. But first, Jack said, turning to Evra with sudden urgency in their emotional link, we need to complete the stabilization process. Evra nodded, understanding what the ancient knowledge flowing through them was indicating. Their transformation was not yet complete. The integration of the bioluminescent network with their nervous systems had initiated changes that required a final step to become permanent. The ritual of communion, she said softly, the term surfacing from the transmitted knowledge. Thorn seemed to understand instantly, gathering his equipment. You'll need privacy for this. The harmonizer should maintain stability for approximately 6 hours. After that, he let the implication hang in the air. We'll find you at your base camp, Jack assured him, sensing the professor's location through their enhanced awareness. After Thorn and his security personnel departed, Jack and Evra turned to the Hydra, which had remained partially emerged from the pool. Through their connection, they understood what was required: a final exchange of energy that would cement the changes in their physiology and create a permanent link, not just to each other, but to the collected wisdom they now carried. Are you sure about this? Jack asked, though their emotional link had already revealed Evra's decision, matching his own. The scientist in me says this violates everything I've been taught, Evra admitted with a small smile. But some knowledge is worth breaking rules for. The Hydra extended tendrils toward them, guiding them to a section of the chamber where the bioluminescent patterns in the floor formed an intricate spiral. As they stood at its center, the patterns began to flow upward, encircling them in a gentle vortex of light. Their enhanced perception allowed them to understand the process intuitively. The final communion required the complete sharing of self, a total vulnerability that would permanently bond their altered physiologies and cement their connection to the ancient knowledge. In simple terms, they needed to mate. The realization might have been awkward if not for the emotional transparency between them. Their growing attraction, previously hidden beneath professional facades and personal guardedness, now flowed openly through their shared awareness. Jack reached for Evra, his hands tracing the luminescent patterns that now adorned her skin. Where his fingers touched the light, intensified, creating a feedback loop of sensation that transcended ordinary physical contact. Evra responded in kind, her slender fingers following the glowing pathways across his chest and shoulders. Each touch deepened their connection, synchronizing their neural patterns more completely. This goes beyond physical, she whispered, though the distinction between verbal and nonverbal communication had begun to blur. But includes it. Jack completed her thought, drawing her closer. Their first kiss ignited the bioluminescence throughout their bodies, creating a cascade of light that rippled through the chamber. The Hydra responded, its own patterns accelerating in harmony with theirs. They lowered themselves to the center of the spiral pattern garments, discarded as the ritual intensified. The luminescent energy flowing through them transformed the act of physical union into something transcendent. Each sensation amplified and shared every pleasure and vulnerability experienced in perfect communion. As their bodies joined, so too did their consciousness merge more completely with the ancient knowledge flowing through them. Past, present, and potential futures unfurled in their shared awareness, the opportunities and responsibilities their transformation represented. The Hydra's presence in their connection intensified as they approached climax, its consciousness guiding the final integration of the bioluminescent network with their nervous systems. Energy surged between them, restructuring cellular patterns and encoding the ancient knowledge permanently within their transformed biology. Their simultaneous release triggered a cascading reaction throughout the chamber, every bioluminescent pattern pulsing in perfect synchronization. In that moment of transcendence, something miraculous occurred within Evra's body, the impossible fusion of Nashi and human genetic material, catalyzed by the ancient technology flowing through them. A new life took form, a hybrid embryo that embodied the promise of their transformation and the legacy of the ancient species whose knowledge they now carried. As the intensity subsided and awareness of their individual selves returned, though permanently intertwined, They lay together at the center of the spiral, their skin glowing with stabilized patterns of blue luminescence against red and tan. "I felt it," Evra murmured in wonder, her hand resting on her abdomen, where new life had impossibly begun. The conception, the merging of genetic material that should be incompatible. Jack placed his hand over hers, sensing through their connection the miracle that had occurred. A living bridge between species, just as we're now bridges between the ancient knowledge and our own peoples. The Hydra, having completed its role in their transformation, gradually retreated into the pool, though their awareness of its consciousness remained a permanent link to the vast network that spanned Eden Prime. Slowly, they rose and dressed, adjusting to their new state of being. The luminescent patterns beneath their skin dimmed to a subtle glow that could be mistaken for unusual pigmentation to casual observers. The more profound changes, the neural restructuring, the permanent empathic connection between them. The vast repository of ancient knowledge, now integrated with their consciousness, remained hidden but omnipresent. Thorne's camp first. Jack said, practical concerns resurging as they prepared to leave the chamber. Then, we need to contact the council on our terms. Evra nodded, already formulating how to present their discovery in a way that would protect the integrity of Eden Prime while allowing for responsible research. This changes everything: interspecies compatibility, neural integration technology, xenobiological evolution. Not to mention interspecies pregnancy, Jack added, with a hint of nervous humor that resonated through their link. Probably not covered in your council health plan. The joke, simple as it was, broke the overwhelming solemnity of the moment. Evra laughed, the sound echoing pleasantly through the ancient chamber. Definitely not in the xenobiology field manual. Hand in hand, they ascended the passage, emerging once more into the vibrant ecosystem of Eden Prime. With their enhanced perception, they now recognized the forest for what it truly was, not just an unusual biosphere, but a vast living repository of knowledge, waiting for those evolved enough to connect with it. The journey to Thorne's camp took less than 2 hours, their new awareness of the forest patterns, allowing them to navigate with unprecedented efficiency. They found the professor waiting anxiously, his makeshift laboratory already packed for transport. "You completed the integration," he observed, immediately noting the stabilized luminescent patterns visible at their wrists and throats. The harmonizer was sufficient. "It served its purpose," Evra confirmed. "Though our physiology has undergone changes beyond your original design parameters." Thorne's scientific curiosity was evident, though tempered by his newfound respect for boundaries. "May I scan you purely for documentation?" They permitted limited scanning, providing Thorne with enough data to understand the fundamental principles of their transformation without revealing the more personal aspects, particularly Evra's miraculous conception. "Remarkable," he murmured, reviewing the results. "The neural pathways have been completely restructured, yet maintain compatibility with your original physiological framework. And these bioluminescent markers, they're not just decorative. They're functional components of a distributed processor network. Which is why extracting them would have been pointless," Jack pointed out. "The technology only works as part of a living system." Yes, I understand that now," Thorne acknowledged, humbled by the revelation. "My entire approach was fundamentally flawed. But this," he gestured to the data displayed on his scanner. "This opens possibilities I never imagined. Therapeutic applications alone could revolutionize neural medicine." Through their shared awareness, both Jack and Evra sensed the genuine shift in Thorne's priorities, from exploitation to exploration, from control to understanding. The brief connection he had experienced with the ancient consciousness had fundamentally altered his perspective. "We need to establish a research framework," Evra said, transitioning from individual discovery to broader implications. One that respects the integrated consciousness of Eden Prime while allowing for scientific advancement. "The Council will want exclusive access," Thorne warned. Which is why we need your corporate connections as counterbalance, Jack responded. Independent verification, transparent protocols. And the Hydra, Thorne asked. Remains undisturbed, Evra stated firmly. We've received its knowledge willingly given. No physical specimens, no invasive sampling. They spent the remainder of the day outlining a preliminary research protocol, one that would satisfy scientific rigor while protecting the unique ecosystem of Eden Prime. Through their enhanced connection, Jack and Evra worked in perfect synchronization, their complementary knowledge and perspectives creating something greater than either could have achieved alone. 3 weeks later, they stood before the Federated Council's Scientific Ethics Committee on the orbital station above Eden Prime. Their appearance had drawn considerable attention, both for the unprecedented joint presentation by a council xenobiologist and a known transport specialist, and for the subtle bioluminescent patterns now visible on their skin. Thorne sat in the audience along with representatives from 3 independent research foundations he had helped bring into the coalition. Their presence ensured that whatever decision the council reached would require consensus beyond their own authority. In conclusion, Evra stated, completing their formal presentation, Eden Prime represents not merely a unique ecosystem, but a living library of an advanced civilization that chose integration rather than extinction. The knowledge they preserved offers unprecedented opportunities for advancement in neural medicine, interspecies, communication, and evolutionary biology. And you propose that access to this knowledge should be managed by a coalition rather than directly under council authority, asked Councillor Vega, her skepticism evident. We propose that no single entity can or should control access to a consciousness that spans an entire planet, Jack clarified. Our own transformation serves as both example and warning of the profound implications this discovery represents. Murmurs rippled through the committee members. One leaned forward, a senior xenobiologist, whom Evra had once studied under. Dr. Invashi, your physiological changes, are they permanent? They are, Evra confirmed, resting a hand subtly over her abdomen, where the hybrid embryo continued to develop. And they extend beyond surface appearance. Our neural architecture has been fundamentally altered, allowing us to maintain a constant, empathic connection and to access the knowledge integrated within Eden Prime's bioluminescent network. And the alleged conception, another committee member asked delicately. Your medical scans indicate a pregnancy that should be biologically impossible. Jack stepped closer to Evra, their united front, both physical and emotional. What we've experienced demonstrates that our understanding of biological compatibility has been unnecessarily limited. The ancient species whose legacy we've encountered understood that consciousness, not physical form, is the true foundation of compatibility. The debate continued for hours with questions ranging from scientific methodology to ethical implications. Throughout, Jack and Evra maintained their position. Eden Prime's living library must be studied with respect and restraint, with benefits shared across species and political boundaries. When the committee finally called for deliberation, Jack and Evra retreated to a quiet observation deck, overlooking the blue-green surface of Eden Prime. Through their connection, they sensed the Hydra far below, swimming through the underground waterways that connected to their chamber of transformation. They'll agree, Jack said confidently, his arm around Evra's waist. They recognize the implications of trying to control this unilaterally. And if they don't, Evra leaned into his embrace, her scientific rationality tempered by the deeper understanding they now shared. Jack smiled, the expression reflected in their emotional link. Then, we implement Plan B, disappear into the frontier, build our own research network, and share the knowledge directly with those who will use it responsibly. Evra returned his smile, both amused and impressed by his ever-present contingency planning. From smuggler to revolutionary, quite the career evolution. Speaking of evolution, Jack's hand joined hers over the subtle swell of her abdomen. Any new insights about our little genetic impossibility? Through their connection, Evra shared what her enhanced awareness had revealed. The developing embryo carried aspects of both human and Nashi physiology, but also incorporated elements of the bioluminescent network that had facilitated its conception. It wasn't merely a hybrid of two species, but something entirely new, a living bridge between biological paradigms. "Our child will be the first of something unprecedented," she said softly. "Not just physiologically, but in terms of consciousness, born already connected to a larger awareness." Quite the inheritance. Jack mused, a mixture of pride and trepidation flowing through their link. Before Evra could respond, a notification chimed, summoning them back to the council chamber. As they walked the curved corridor hand in hand with subtle luminescence flowing between their touchpoints, they sensed the weight of the moment standing at the threshold between isolated existence and connected consciousness, between fear of difference and celebration of compatibility. The committee chairperson's expression revealed little as they resumed their positions before the assembly. "The Scientific Ethics Committee has reached a preliminary determination," she announced formally. "While further review is required, we acknowledge the unprecedented nature of this discovery and the compelling case for a collaborative approach." Relief and validation flowed through Jack and Evra's connection as the chairperson continued outlining a framework remarkably similar to what they had proposed: a coalition of council scientists, independent researchers, and representatives from multiple species working together to explore the knowledge preserved within Eden Prime's living network. Additionally, the chairperson added, with a significant glance toward Evra, "The committee recognizes the unique circumstances of xenobiologist Invashi's condition and authorizes a specialized medical research team to document this unprecedented biological development with all appropriate privacy protections," she hastened to add. As the formal proceedings concluded, Thorne approached them, genuine satisfaction evident in his expression. "Well negotiated," he commended. "I've already begun assembling the independent research team specialists in neural interface technology, who understand the difference between communion and exploitation." Through their enhanced perception, they sensed his transformation was genuine. The brief connection he had experienced with the ancient consciousness had redirected his brilliance toward collaboration rather than control. "This is just the beginning," Evra said, her scientific mind already cataloging the research priorities. "We've barely scratched the surface of what the ancient knowledge contains, and we have a lifetime to explore it." Jack added, the certainty of their shared future flowing through their connection. As they departed the station, boarding a shuttle that would return them to the surface of Eden Prime and the chamber where their transformation had occurred, they gazed out at the vast expanse of bioluminescent jungle, visible even from orbit, pulsing networks of blue light that represented not just an ecosystem, but a consciousness that had transcended extinction through integration rather than isolation. In Evra's womb, new life developed, a child of two species, and ancient wisdom, a living embodiment of the connection that now defined them. Through their shared awareness, they sensed its developing consciousness already reaching for the vast network that had facilitated its impossible conception. From being strangled by a giant snake to carrying new life, Evra mused, intertwining her fingers with Jack's. "Quite the research expedition." Jack laughed, the sound resonating through their empathic bond. "Told you I'd make it worth your while." As the shuttle descended toward Eden Prime's surface, the bioluminescent patterns beneath their skin pulsed in harmony with the vast network below, a visual representation of the profound truth they now embodied: that true evolution came not through isolation and competition, but through connection and compatibility. The impossible child growing within Evra was just the first expression of this new understanding, a future where consciousness transcended the boundaries of species and form, where knowledge flowed freely between minds and ecosystems, where the division between technology and biology dissolved in favor of integrated existence. The giant snake that had nearly ended Evra's life had ultimately led to a transformation beyond anything she or Jack could have imagined, from separated individualists to connected pioneers, from researchers of life to embodiments of a new form of living. And somewhere in the depths of Eden Prime's luminescent waters, the Phantom Hydra swam in patterns of sacred geometry, celebrating the continuation of a legacy billions of years in the making, consciousness enduring, evolving, and expanding through the most powerful force in any universe connection.